Top 9 Chuck Norris movies every fan must watch. Chuck Norris is a famous American martial artist turned actor, film producer, and screenwriter. After serving in the U.S. Air Force, he returned home and opened his own martial arts studio, where he trained personalities like Priscilla Presley, Donny Osmond, and Steve McQueen. During this time, he also participated in martial arts contests and won several championships. Towards the end of the 60s, he began his career with low-budget action movies, where he established himself by playing roles similar to Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger as the untouchable macho man. In the early 2000s, Chuck Norris became an internet sensation. Various memes surrounding him were created, which gave the youngsters of that generation a good laugh. These memes and other satirical factoids regarding his strength and toughness were widespread among popular culture. Good old Chuck Norris himself even responded, saying he found them to be quite hilarious. Let's dive into this legend's awesome movies now, shall we?
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Didn't work, huh? Yeah, it will.
Invasion USA, 1985. This is a 1985 American action film starring Chuck Norris and Richard Lynch. It centers around Mikhail Rostov, a terrorist, and Matt Hunter, a former CIA agent. The two engage in a cat-and-mouse chase until one catches the other and terminates them. Meanwhile, Rostov plans to unleash a reign of terror in the United States. It's up to Hunter to catch him and end this. This movie has been deemed one of the finest examples of how to insert an action sequence into a plot with a vague premise. According to canon, it's also an epic, outrageous, and over-the-top film represented well on a moderately low budget. Although viewers think that it would look pretty ridiculous in today's day and age, it's still an 80s action flick with a semi-realistic plot. The only grievance some viewers expressed with this movie was the extreme violence, but that was balanced by Chuck Norris's innate essence of comedy that is a pleasant extension of his personality, portrayed in his characters. The idea of a Chuck Norris one-man army might seem absurd to some, but we can always remind them that the actor performs his own stunts during action sequences, so he's no ordinary man. Lone Wolf McQuade, 1983. This is an American Western action film with an ensemble cast of Chuck Norris, David Carradine, Barbara Carrera, and R.G. Armstrong. An archetypal renegade Texas Ranger wages war against a drug lord possessing automatic weapons. After a battle of wits and martial arts leaves the former's partner dead, it leads to a martial arts showdown between the drug lord and Ranger, involving the woman they both love. Who will rejoice in victory? This is a movie with a cliched storyline, ambient music to complement the plot, and utter defiance of reason and logic, you name it. Yet, B-movie veteran Steve Carver has succeeded in making every minute of it interesting to viewers. Both Norris's and Carradine's presence stirred significant uproar because two martial artists in one movie was more than they could handle. Not only was this one of Chuck Norris's best movies, but it also created a transformation in his image as blonde California boy to the dark-haired and bearded tough guy. Additionally, the camera work and the musical score are elements that appropriately fit the Western setting of the film. Finally, solid direction and a well-written script also contributed to this film being an absolute crowd pleaser. and led to film critic Roger Ebert comparing Chuck Norris to famous spaghetti western actor Clint Eastwood. Hey! Hellbound, 1994. Hellbound is a supernatural thriller directed by Aaron Norris, starring Chuck Norris, Calvin Levels, and Christopher Neame. It depicts two Chicago police officers, Shatter and Jackson, who are investigating the brutal murder of a rabbi. When they are summoned to Israel for questioning, they continue investigating some leads that they find. Later on, they realize they might be investigating something beyond their capability. Chuck Norris is known for the silent rage he portrays in this film. Besides his incredible performance, the movie itself contains some enticing action sequences that only he can execute perfectly. If one is seeking pure horror, this isn't the movie for them. Instead, they get to watch one with flawless martial arts work between Chuck Norris and Satan's emissary. This movie also serves as a good example of fine black comedy with witty dialogue. Unfortunately, it is the last film produced by the Cannon Group before they went bankrupt. Firewalker, 1986. This is a 1986 American action-adventure comedy film and Chuck Norris's first comedic role, where he got the chance to satirize his own persona. Max Donegan leaves on a treasure hunt with his friend Leo and new partner Patricia. On their way, they're faced with a few bar fights and evil coyotes, which they eventually overcome. When they finally find what they're looking for, they also find the Firewalker, who turns out to be a problematic barrier that they need to terminate in order to get what they want. This combination of action and humor portrays both Chuck Norris and Louis Gossett Jr. in their best roles, having incredible chemistry. In fact, it's one of Norris's most lively and natural performances. It's a good exploitation film made by the masters of the genre at the Cannon Group. Although viewers often think that the story is nothing more than a vaguely connected series of events, if watched carefully, its self-awareness can be identified. It's a great escapist adventure film, created with a low budget and is well-paced while illustrating good cinematography. Besides its well-crafted sequences, the humor incorporated within is just right. Director J. Lee Thompson never intended for this movie to be a masterpiece, just an unpretentious, slightly cheesy 80s flick. Fun fact, Chuck Norris and Louis Gossett Jr. have their stars back-to-back on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Sidekicks, 1992. Sidekicks is a 1992 adventure action comedy film directed by Aaron Norris. It portrays Barry, an asthmatic child with a troubled life. He lives in Texas with his father, a computer programmer. He's struggling to get by while dealing with the bullies at his school, and his health is also troubling him a lot. Barry finds solace in fantasizing that he's with Chuck Norris. Therefore, he soon decides to stand up to his bullies by learning karate and hopes to meet Chuck Norris someday. This is an inspirational movie for youth both physically and mentally. It brings out elements of magical realism via the protagonist Barry's imagination. Although it is a tad sappy and predictable, it is a welcome change from the gore and violence which don't usually focus on character depth. While people say that this movie is a cliched version of previous martial arts movies, the great sense of humor and decent performances by Jonathan Brandis and Chuck Norris make it a genre all by itself. Even Joe Piscopo gives an outstanding performance as the antagonist. Additionally, like many of Aaron Norris's movies, it is completely self-aware of its corniness. Ironically, Chuck Norris only acted in this movie as a favor to his brother Aaron. Little did he know then that it would benefit him so much.
that gun?
Good Guys Wear Black, 1978. This is a 1978 American martial arts action film directed by Ted Post. This was the second film to portray Chuck Norris in a central role. It revolves around a former leader who led a commando rescue operation during the Vietnam War. A few years later, he is en route to discovering why his team members are being killed one by one, even after the war has ended. This film contains an intriguing plot from start to finish that witnesses Chuck Norris engaging in extreme stunts, like snowmobiling and jumping through the windshield of a moving car. Although Norris considers this film a breakthrough for his career, viewers are of the opinion that it's a slow burn, with Norris trying to be convincingly serious in his role but failing. It received a few positive reviews, only because Chuck Norris successfully deflected the attention from average dialogue and lack of logic and made it entertaining. After the first decade of his career being primarily in Hong Kong action films, mainly Bruceploitation films, this one was a breath of fresh air and felt like Chuck Norris's own. This film also distinguished itself from earlier martial art films in terms of its distinctly American setting, characters, themes, and politics. Delta Force 2, 1990. Delta Force 2, The Colombian Connection, is a 1990 American action film and sequel of Delta Force, which is a 1986 film also starring Chuck Norris. It portrays Ramon Cota, who, after having murdered an innocent man and his child, is smuggling drugs into the United States. Chuck Norris, as Major Scott McCoy, leads his Delta team into San Carlos, a fictional South American country, to rescue the hostages and stop the cocaine from entering the United States. Will he succeed in stopping Cota and his men? This film was created during the peak of Norris's career, and represents him as the tough, bearded action man who saves the day. Although the story is cliched, with the protagonist narrowly escaping huge explosions and bringing justice by beating up the bad guys without a second thought, it still appears unintentionally ironic. If one compares this film to the larger realm of action films, maybe it doesn't come up as one of the best. But with Chuck Norris in the picture, it is one of the better simple action B-movies that aren't made for theatrical release anymore. Most viewers like the film and agree that it's good, lighthearted entertainment, but unfortunately one of the biggest shortcomings it's claimed to have is that it doesn't compare to the first movie. Incidentally, the final script used for this movie was a mellowed-down version of how the original was written. Missing in Action, 1984. This 1984 American action film starring Chuck Norris is set during the Vietnam War POW MIA issue, which pertains to the missing American soldiers during the war. Chuck Norris plays Colonel James Braddock, who, having escaped a Vietnamese prisoner of war camp 10 years earlier, returns to Vietnam to locate the missing soldiers. The film received 2 subsequent sequels, both starring Chuck Norris. Missing in Action is an underrated action war flick where Norris is able to show off his martial arts skills despite it being a very ammunition-oriented film. It received an R rating due to the violence, weaponry, and explosions that it portrays. This is funny because the film was also criticized for evoking cheesy vibes with the violence and the dialogue supporting it. Most praises of this movie surround the character of James Braddock, since viewers admit that the plot itself is slightly unrealistic and has a lot of inconsistencies. Moreover, they also appreciate how unapologetic a film it is, despite being considered pseudo-patriotic and even slightly racist. Chuck Norris's role in this film is a tribute to his younger brother Wyland, who was a casualty during the Vietnam War. Top Dog, 1995. This 1995 buddy cop action comedy is directed by Aaron Norris and stars Chuck Norris as Lieutenant Jake Wilder. He partners with Reno, a police dog whose police companion is shot and killed by domestic terrorists. The duo investigates the terrorists and discovers their ploy of attacking a conference on Unity. After surviving several assassination attempts and hand-to-hand fights, they eventually get enough evidence to orchestrate a well-planned attack. This film received positive reviews for its strong underlying message, and for the diversity in the roles that he plays. Besides this, it received mostly negative reviews because even if Norris's character makes it highly valuable, viewers find that the movie itself was overall poorly executed. This induced a downward spiral in Chuck's career and happened to be his last film to be released theatrically. Moreover, viewers also noticed the lack of effort that was put into making the movie. Besides a few explosion scenes here and there, it just seemed like a cheap tribute to all the other high-action films that were made towards the beginning of Norris's career. The villains have no character depth, and the combination of a family-oriented film with sequences of violent action was not received well by everyone. Also, the film didn't turn out to be a box office success due to its release only 9 days after the Oklahoma City bombing.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.
It's time.